Hi everybody. Normally when I get a single disc in the mail, I'll save it for a future pickups video to go ahead and talk about it, or save it for a laser talk and just kind of show it quickly in a pickups video. But this one is something that is incredibly special. It is, for me, my favorite TV miniseries of all time, and if you clicked on the description and looked at it, you already know what it is. But if not, first I want to mention a little bit about the miniseries event, because it's not really something that is prevalent anymore in the TV landscape. It's something that has disappeared and doesn't have the same meaning, and I think a lot of younger viewers, and I do have a good deal of people in the under 20 crowd that do watch my channel, and there seems to be a growing interest, which is really exciting, in LaserDisc in that younger generation. I've started to notice that a little bit more just within the past 6 months to a year, just different people commenting, and even people that I know having an interest in that format, which is pretty cool. I think in a way it partially has something to do with the rise of vinyl with that same age group. I think there's a relation to that popularity. But the TV miniseries, in this world of streaming and Netflix and Hulu, it doesn't have the same momentous event feeling that it used to have. Even though you could record things off TV with either VHS or Betamax, it wasn't the same thing where you used to have to sit down at a specific time, and it was a cool event when you got to sit down and watch a TV series, you know, from 6 to 7 every Thursday night or that type of thing. It used to be a very, very set thing that's not quite as common now, and even when there is a show that is popular when it first airs, a lot of the audience then watches it later on Hulu or something like that with the Orville, because we don't have cable. I watched that on Hulu afterwards. And a miniseries was taking that to a grand scale, because it was something that was smaller than a weekly television series as far as the length of it, but its budget and the scope of it was more like a big feature film, but it was much longer than a feature film. A lot of these miniseries were 3 to 8 or 9 hours long, and this was something that was very, very big in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, particularly the 80s and 90s. It was a big deal. You had things like Roots. Roots is probably the one that comes up the most, the one most people know, and there was a remake of Roots not that long ago, but the original Roots was a huge event. Stuff like Band of Brothers. In the 90s we got a really cool Merlin one, which had a lot of great 80s and 90s people that I really, really enjoy. And also in the 90s we got this one, the Odyssey. I absolutely love this. Absolutely incredible. And it used to be that the idea of a TV miniseries it would air in usually 2 to 3 hour chunks with multiple chapters. And it used to be that you'd see it and it would kind of go away then. It used to be everyone would sit down and everyone would watch this thing from this set time, and you maybe never saw it again. Maybe the common thing would be to rerun previous parts before the next part airs, or after the whole thing is done, maybe have one big long marathon of the miniseries, and then it just kind of went away, and you don't really see a lot of reruns usually of those type of things. I remember watching Band of Brothers was another one that I remember being very popular as I was growing up. But these were huge events. You sit down for hours and you just couldn't wait for the next part. And the TV miniseries, sometimes they would spawn another miniseries if it was popular enough. Something like V spawned another series, another miniseries, and sometimes a miniseries would be so popular it would spawn a weekly television series. And as far as those multi-part miniseries events, my favorite of that easily is the BBC late 80s to early 90s, I think it was 88 to 90, the Chronicles of Narnia. They did The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. They did a combination one of Prince Caspian and the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and then they did The Silver Chair. And I wish they'd done all the books, that would be great. But those, as far as a multi-part miniseries event, that's my absolute favorite of all time. My favorite kind of one-off, though, a two-parter here, so the whole thing without the original commercials and everything is a little over 3 hours, is the Odyssey. My favorite one-off miniseries thing. It didn't spawn off to a sequel. It didn't have. I had multiples. Didn't do a weekly series. My one-off thing. This is my favorite miniseries of all time, and a lot of that has to do with not only is it of incredible quality for the time, it also came at the perfect moment in my life. It came out in 1997, and in the 90s, the only thing that rivaled my love of Star Trek was my obsession growing up with Hercules' Legendary Journeys and Xena Warrior Princess, and that spawned an adoration, a love of Greek mythology during that point in my childhood. And then for something in 1997, in the midst of all that to come out, that is the Odyssey. I mean, how much more perfect could you get? And you also had the visual work, which really appealed to me because it had a lot of ties to stuff I was enjoying at that time. all of these creature effects and most of the visual effects in total were done by the Jim Henson Company, and they did such an amazing job because their effects tied with the entire look of this miniseries. It really feels like a combination of Harryhausen's effects in something like Jason and the Argonauts. It really feels like a mix between that and the 90s fantasy aesthetic that was kind of built around the look of Hercules: The Legendary Journeys. The original TV movies of that series, before the series even started, kind of built a look that was copied in its own twist put upon for lots of TV series and miniseries in the fantasy genre during the 90s. They all had a very similar look, so this is a beautiful combination visually of very classic effects for these stories. Something like Clash of the Titans or Jason and the Argonauts mixed with that 90s fantasy aesthetic, and that combination is just absolutely fantastic. But as wonderful as the visuals are and the effects are and the music score, I love the music score in this, all of that for something like a miniseries to really draw you in. The story has to be presented so well, and the actors really have to be just perfectly iconic for those roles. They really have to work because it's such a time investment. This is actually somewhat of a shorter miniseries at a little over 3 hours. There are many that are much longer that sometimes go into the 8-9 hour range or many parts. And I remember sitting through so many of those on TV over the years. I think the first thing I ever saw were those Narnia ones on PBS. They were airing when I was really little, like kindergarten, I think. And then just sitting these huge fabulous events that it's not quite the same. It's kind of hard to get across unless you were alive during that time. The meaning of a miniseries, and it was called a miniseries event, and it really was an event and a spectacle, and it was something that was different. And now a lot of TV series, the miniseries is kind of the normal 12-episode TV series are you getting on Netflix and things like that. It's just not quite the same sensation. And this is one that the acting really gives tremendous support to the visual effects. It's something that's fun to watch, fun to listen to, but there's so much quality storytelling in here. It does a fantastic translation of Homer's epic poem in a way that it's not overly long, it's not drawn out, but it doesn't really leave so much out that you start to miss the humanity of it and you start to miss the message. It's just boiled down to its perfect essence in the most exciting, fascinating way that keeps the emotion alive. And it's such a great translation of that. Something that could have been so drawn out to where it would lose its way in a visual medium, because reading something is different than watching something. And, a movie adaptation of the Odyssey, like a 2-hour movie, is very different than a miniseries versus if it was a weekly series. And this, to me, they really found a way to perfect the presentation of this journey, of this story, in this format. And Armando Asante is amazing as Odysseus. He, to me, will always be Odysseus after watching this. Just fabulous, and I don't have a single problem with anyone in here. And sometimes in these miniseries, you would get either occasionally B-movie actors or actors who are doing it for a bit of a celebrity name. They like to attach a lot of these miniseries to have a celebrity name attached to it just to bring audiences in a little bit more. No one here really takes that. Even someone who is known more as a pop star, Vanessa Williams is in here for a little bit. She's actually really good in her small part. A lot of great people are in really small supporting roles that really don't steal the stage from anyone with their star power. Bernadette Peters is in there. Just this huge list of incredible actors who are really, you can tell, doing it for the love of the work and the love of the storytelling, and you just feel so much genuine drama in here that it's absolutely incredible. I love every second of this. There's nothing about this that I can find fault with, and part of that is just that nostalgic appeal, because this could not have come at a more perfect time, right in the middle of my obsession with Greek mythology and Xena and Hercules. You get the Odyssey, a big mini-series event. That was huge. And you don't have that anymore. It's such a bizarre concept to me that even someone in their like teens probably doesn't understand the miniseries idea, and you can just kind of, if you miss it, just watch it later on a streaming service. It's a very, very different world, and you kind of miss things like Xena and Hercules. I'll never forget, Hercules was Fridays 8 to 9, and Xena 9 to 10. That's something that's burned into my brain for the rest of my life. And watching some of these miniseries, yeah, this is just absolutely incredible, and this, I just finished watching it. I got it yesterday. I watched the first part last night when I got home from work. Just finished watching the second half again, and it's just as spectacular as I remember. I loved every second of it, and this is such a good quality disc. It's such a beautiful, clean looking and sounding version of exactly what I remember on broadcast TV in the 90s, and that's one of the things that I love about LaserDisc format. It just looks like a clean, perfect version of what I saw. It's not upscaled. It's not digital. It's not messed with updated special effects. It's literally just the perfect home version of something from that time period in a beautiful, just amazing time capsule. And just it's a brilliant set. This is one that if you've not seen this and you're not really familiar even with the idea of a TV miniseries, just look some of these up because they're really fascinating, and it's a great way of telling a story because it gives it more breathing room than just a typical like 2 hour and a half, 2 hour movie. It gives a lot more breathing room to tell its story, but it doesn't have to be broken up into so many chunks like a weekly television series, which has to, even if it's not something that has to have its story wrapped up every week, even if it's something that's more serialized, it still has to find natural points of stopping and progression within the time limits of the 3-minute window, say, for each episode. There's still a barrier there, even if it's a serialized story. Here you don't have that barrier. It's more breathing room, and it's also, it's not broken up, and it doesn't have to drag on, because sometimes a TV series doesn't end when it naturally ends. It's more of, based on ratings, it might end before its story is wrapped up. It might drag on beyond the natural point of that story being finished. And with a miniseries, it's just, this is the time we're working with. This is the way we're going to tell our story. There's not going to be more. There's not going to be less. This is what we have, and let's flesh it out and make it wonderful. And when it turns out great, a TV miniseries is one of the greatest ways to experience a fantastic story. And this, just for the effects, for the acting, for the beautiful drama, for the wonderful score, for the time period that it really just brings me back to, this is such an incredible release that you should probably add to your collection. If you have any interest in anything, I was saying, if you like Xena and Hercules, I know a lot of people that watch me enjoy those series, check this out. Something very different from that, but it has enough similarities in the type of story that it's telling and some visual cues that remind me of those series in that era that it's just such a wonderful experience. The 1997, the Odyssey, my favorite miniseries.